Good evening, everybody. Welcome to tonight's edition of the Triangle Area SQL Server User Group's Business Intelligence and Data Science meeting. So we are here with Matthew Roche, who's going to talk to us about building a data culture. So building that center of excellence and getting life in good place with Microsoft Fabric and with Power BI. With that, I'd like to hand it right off to you, Matthew. So please take it away.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Kevin. So I want to do a quick, brief introduction of me. So as Kevin mentioned, my name is Matthew Roche. I am a principal program manager lead on the Fabric Customer Advisory Team, or Fabric Cat team at Microsoft. I've been at Microsoft for 15 years. As of a couple months from now, I rounded up on the slide. I've been doing data and tech professionally for right around 28 years or so. So I've been there, I've done that, played a variety of roles as a developer, as a DBA, as a consultant, as a trainer, as an architect, and as a program manager on integration services, master data services, data quality services, Power BI V1, like Power BI for Office 365, as well as Azure Data Catalog, like a lot of information management and data governance stuff in there. Like if you follow me on any sort of social media, you know that I'm really big into heavy metal. The picture on the intro slide was taken while waiting to see Manowar, the world's greatest heavy metal band, for their show in Berlin back in February. And this is going to come in actually relevant to this topic later on. I am a multi-medal winning swordsman. So I'm a competitive longsword fighter. And as I enter my golden years, like I'm not quite as young as I used to be, I've been doing much more competitive cutting with sharp swords as well. You can follow me on LinkedIn, on Mastodon, and I have a blog at ssbipolar.com. But the other thing that I want to mention, like the unique thing for this call, like I've never participated in a Twitch stream before, and I want to highlight a couple things about interactivity. So I cannot see the Twitch user experience, the things that you put in there. Kevin, our gracious host, is going to be reading, responding, and curating your feedback, as well as relating it as we go. So to give you a heads up for what to expect for this roughly 60-minute presentation, we have an introduction, sort of setting the background. We have a top tip once the introduction is done. Like if you have to leave, this is the most important thing to leave or to take away. We're going to have the easy part and then the hard part, and then we're going to have some summary resources and stuff at the end. Each one of these sections is going to have an obvious section intro slide, something that looks like this. Come on. All right. I just realized that I haven't actually.
Yeah,
There we go.
I was gonna ask about that. I'm still seeing the building a data culture title.
This picture. So I've got my remote, but it's moving my slideshow or so my slides and not my slideshow. So this is the way that you establish your technical expertise with a new audience. So you show them that you know how to use technology. So at multiple points through the presentation, you will see a slide that looks like this one. Like when you see a slide that fits this format, this is going to be the place where I pause briefly, ask if there are any questions. Kevin will relay them. So this is sort of his visual cue as well. But the main thing, the reason I'm going through all of these details is so that you know what to expect and that you understand that this is hopefully a reasonably interactive presentation. This topic is not your standard BI, data, SQL talk. This is the real deal. It's the squishy stuff that makes all of the hard stuff fit together. And a lot of the questions that tend to come up are the things that add value, not just to the person asking it, but to the broader audience as well. So please do get your questions into chat. Kevin is ready, like operators are standing by. And with that said, before I jump into the topic of data culture, I actually want to look back at where we are and how we got here with what I call a brief history of data and BI. And when I was a boy your age, so when I was beginning my career or before, this is what a lot of a lot of end-to-end data systems looked like. There was some sort of source data that you see on the left-hand side of the slide, like these transactional systems or systems of record where the data is being created and mastered. There are some sort of data preparation or ETL processes that get the data from your full set of transactional systems, those data sources, into something downstream, putting it in the right shape with the right granularity, the right format, the right place at the right time, so that instead of using it to handle transactions, you can handle it to make decisions. This is a data warehouse, a data mart, a data lake, perhaps in these modern times. But very often, in order to scale to meet the downstream needs of business users who don't care about the technology, they just need the data to help them make decisions in a timely way. There evolved the need to have OLAP or analytics models. Like it could be a cube, it could be a tabular model, but it's super fast. It's designed to have the in-memory representation of the data for fast interactive analytics. And then on the other end, you've got dashboards, reports, scorecards, like the things that people use to look at data, to understand data, and to make decisions. And the compelling thing in my mind is that even though a lot of the specific tactical details have changed, like the capabilities of a given component have evolved significantly over the decades, this picture is just as true today as it was 30 years ago. The biggest difference, and like we can agree to disagree on this one, but the single biggest difference in investment in the capabilities around data and analytics, it's not the functionality, it is who can do what. And the thing that is compelling is that the full range of end-to-end capabilities, both with Power BI and Fabric from a Microsoft perspective, but let's be honest, Microsoft is not the only vendor that's out there. Like we believe that we've got a compelling set of SaaS capabilities that are easy to use, blah, blah, blah. But there are lots of self-service vendors out there that are producing capabilities that let business users do things that it used to take a developer or data analyst, developer or data engineer to do before, that now someone whose primary responsibility might be sales or marketing or advertising or HR, they can do that work without the need for true, deep, specialized knowledge. And one of the reasons, like the core reason that self-service capabilities evolved in the first place was because IT organizations, as a rule, cannot keep up with the ongoing demands of the business. Like business constantly needs to change, and IT is usually not staffed enough to keep up. So like back in the bad old days, before you had Power BI or your self-service BI tool of choice, you would often need to submit a request to IT and then wait weeks or months for them to do things like add a field to a table in a report, add a new attribute to a dimension in a data warehouse, and then the downstream reports. Like this very long lead time. And with self-service BI, those problems went away and a brand new population of problems came in to fill the space. So now, instead of business being slowed or stopped by the poor response time of IT, now business users whose core strength is never, ever going to be like maintainability, best practices, good star schema design, like all of the things that if you're attending a Power BI SQL Server user group presentation, the things that you care deeply about, the average finance analyst is never gonna care about. So the self-service capabilities have introduced a brand new set of challenges, and they've introduced the dynamic that never existed before. In a lot of organizations that are forward-looking, like this isn't a new set of challenges. They've been around for 5 years, or I guess Power BI's 8th birthday was yesterday, so they've been around for at least 8 years. But in a lot of smaller organizations that may not be on the cutting edge, these may be problems that are new or new-ish to you, and this is where the topic of a data culture is going to become more and more important. So I've got slides that define terms, but before I read what past Matthew put in PowerPoint, I want to say that in my mind, the core characteristic of a healthy, successful data culture is having more people make more decisions more often with more of the right data, using it in the right way. So, like having data available as the raw material for more of these decisions. But I'm sort of short circuiting the talk track that I had planned. We can't really talk about a data culture without agreeing on terms. So I stole this from Wikipedia, or from, I think I might have searched on DuckDuckGo and took a screenshot of the results. But if we think about culture from a broad perspective, it's that full set, the arts, the belief, customs, institutions, blah, 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 especially with regard to a particular time or social group. So think about where you are today. If you're in North America, odds are you drive on the left hand. You drive on the. I don't drive a lot these days. You drive on the right hand side of the road. You you might use the dollar as your currency. Like you listen to some sets of music. You value some sorts of art. Politics are like one thing to you, one thing to your neighbor. If you're based in Europe or in Asia or South America, you'll have different driving practices. Might be the same side of the road, different rules, but this full collective set of stuff is what defines a culture. Another thing that I've heard, or another saying that I've heard that I really love is your culture is what you walk past without noticing, or what you walk past without saying something. Like the things that you take for granted, because that's just how things are. That is a great way to think about culture in a broad, general perspective. And if we tie this together with data, a data culture is that thing that I was mentioning earlier. Wait, stop. All right. So I was expecting highlights to appear. Apparently, my PowerPoint foo is very, very weak today. So I was expecting the build slide to highlight some of the Wikipedia results here. But the data culture is that thing that I was saying earlier. It's like the principle established in the process of social practice, blah, 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 staffs and decision makers to focus on the information conveyed by existing data, make decisions according to these, instead of based on your gut reaction or institutional knowledge or the like. More data driving more business decisions. And this is what it looks like. And I'm going to pause here. And this is one of very few slides that I'm actually going to read from. But the organizations that I work with, and as an aside, my team runs some customer engagement and customer advisory programs where I have the joy of working with the largest customer organizations in the world and engaging with their strategic business and technical decision makers, like the directors who are responsible for global analytics and AI. These are the people that I talk to day in and week out. And the successful data cultures that I see look like this. So imagine if your team, if your organization could make decisions based on common trusted data and that you take it for granted, like it's the norm. Imagine that all of your business users have access to the tools, the data, and the insights that they need, and they take it for granted because that's just how things are. Business users are part of a supported and valued community of practice where guidance and assistance are readily available because people are investing, because leaders are investing in that community, and that business users are recognized and rewarded for their contributions, like maybe getting called out in an all-hands meeting, like, hey, North American org, we want to showcase what Susan has done with her Power BI reports this week and the results, or this quarter, and the results that she's driven. While at the same time, IT teams, the teams that are responsible for the data, those IT teams with the specialized knowledge and skills, they can focus on the architecture, the scale, the complex strategic things that business is never, at least not in our lifetime, going to be able to do, and which tends to give IT people great satisfaction in their jobs. Imagine that data governance is applied in ways that enable people to work with data instead of forcing them outside the system to build their own thing that nobody knows about because somebody said no to them for data that they actually needed. And underpinning this is the fact that IT and business work together in a way that truly achieves shared organizational goals. They are partners. And typically, this means that the mandate of the IT org, at least as it relates to data, is to support business and enable business to be more impactful and more agile. And if you're looking at this and rolling your eyes, it's not made up. It's not the norm, but these organizations do exist. And in this session, in this presentation, I am going to give you the rules that you need to become an organization like this. It is not going to be easy, even though some parts are easier than others, but this is an achievable goal if you understand what's involved and you understand how to get from where you are to this utopian vision of the future. And with this said, Kevin, any questions, anything at all before I move on with the most important topic of the hour?
There are no questions yet.
Is there anybody in the room?
Oh yeah, there are people in the room. They're just lurking, waiting for that top tip.
It's the weirdest thing. I'm here, I'm looking at my camera, but I can't see anybody. So welcome everyone. So the top tip is this: if you don't have an executive sponsor, you will fail. And this is such an important tip that I stretched my PowerPoint skills to the limit to put a mic drop into my presentation. I'll point out I did that myself. I'm very proud of it. But this is, in all seriousness, this is the biggest high order bit that you can imagine. So 9 times out of 10, the scope of a data culture is defined by the authority of its executive sponsor. So if we think about, I'm going to go back to the real world cultural things again. So I am based in upstate New York. So I'm in Syracuse these days. And when I think about the culture of the city that I'm in, the culture of the state that I'm in, the culture of the region like the Northeast, and then the culture of the country or the continent that I'm in, each one of these scopes has different common characteristics. Like if you're in Syracuse, odds are you're going to have salt potatoes with your sweet corn at some point this summer. Like it's just part of the local culture. Nobody outside of Syracuse knows what salt potatoes are. Google it if you're interested. They're fantastic. But in the data culture context, the authority of the sponsor that enables your work and supports your work basically defines the size of the playground and the scope of the data culture that has the ability to exist. If you have an executive sponsor in the C-suite, you are golden. If your executive sponsor is like the director of finance, this means that your data culture is not going to grow beyond the finance org, beyond the scope of that director without significant effort on your part and or the parts of others. And I'm not going to go too far down this path, but when you're thinking about executive sponsorship, some of you are probably saying, well, why would I even bother then? Why don't I drop off the call? Because I don't have an executive sponsor and I don't know any executives, right? So how am I going to get this thing? This guy from Microsoft is saying you can't get there without this thing. So if we think about communicating with executives, the most important thing that you can do is to understand what motivates those executives and what their priorities are. Because 9 times out of 10, they don't care about BI. They do not care about data cultures. Like they may have read a CIO magazine article on digital transformation 5 years ago. But if you're talking to them about the technical details or implementation specifics, you're not going to be able to reach them. But if you are I don't want to say paying attention because that sounds dismissive. If you are engaged in the activities and communication of your VP, your general manager, like who knows what the executive is, but if you know what their responsibilities are, what do they talk about a lot, what do they promote people for, what do they invest in, like where are they putting their money? This is the thing that they care about. An executive's actions and an executive's budget are the most concrete ways that they communicate their priorities and their values. And if you, for example, let's say your director of manufacturing or the chief manufacturing officer, is that a thing? Like I'm using manufacturing as the example here. So the executive in charge of manufacturing, if he's constantly talking about like reducing the error rate, continuous improvement and quality improvement, like he's on a big Six Sigma kick, perhaps, if you are able to demonstrate how by investing in data, BI, analytics, Power BI, Fabric, or whatever, is able to align with his priorities and drive the outcomes that he's most interested in, or she's most interested in. This is the best way to get a potential executive sponsor supporting your data and data culture work. Most of the time, they will not care about the things that you care about in the same way. But what they will care about is the outcomes that your work can enable, assuming that your work truly aligns with their priorities. So, top tip number one, don't bang your head against the brick wall without an executive sponsor. If you don't have an executive who cares about the work that you're doing, at some point you're going to give up, like you're going to burn out and get tired. And then when you stop pushing, when you stop banging your head against that wall, the progress stops and the work that you've done goes away. Understand that this is probably the most important thing. The rest of what we're going to talk about can still drive a lot of value. But if you truly want to build a data culture that will live longer than you in your role with your current priorities, having an executive sponsor is really the key. And that's the next section. Any other questions, Kevin, or any questions yet?
Nothing so far. So, chat, if you've got any questions, get them in. But otherwise, we're looking good.
All right. So the next two sections are the easy part and the hard part. And the easy part is technology. So when we're thinking about building a data culture, perhaps the most important thing to think about from a technology perspective is, where do I invest? What's the management? What's the governance? Where do I put in more effort? Where do I put in less? Because a key aspect of building a data culture is just data governance in general. Like, I'm going to downplay it for this talk, but I'm going to point you to resources where it gets where data governance will get its day in the sun or day in the spotlight. But one of the things that will seem overwhelming at first is like, oh my God, we've been building this giant mess for years or decades. We've got all of these systems. In the last 5 years, we acquired 3 companies, and every company came with its own version of ERP and CRM and people management and enterprise data warehouse. And all of the things exist in all of the places. Where do I start? And the thing that you want to do is you want to identify the business goals that you're working to support and identify those higher value, higher impact, higher risk systems. And for the most part, invest in having good oversight and good governance of those small number of high value systems. And for most things, not worrying about it. So most BI in most organizations is done either as personal BI or team BI. So as a user, I go into Power BI desktop, I go into Excel, I go into whatever my tool of choice is. I to connect to some data, I get some insights, I visualize it, I put it in an email, a Word document, a PowerPoint presentation, and then I'm done. It doesn't get shared beyond me, or maybe I'm making a report that my team of 3 or 5 people work on. for this type of solution, or for data sources that are not used to drive business critical decisions, uh, like like it doesn't matter for the most part, right? If the numbers are wrong or if they're being used improperly, this typically becomes a problem when the reach of the data grows. So if I'm trying to drive, like I've got my own version of what net sales or quarterly sales is, and I'm trying to convince people that my numbers are right, but they're not coming from the system of records, they're not coming from the ERP system where this data should be coming from, sooner or later I'll get called on it. But typically you don't need to find those things proactively. The existence of the problem will make itself aware as the problem uh, as it becomes a problem. And if you look at the little pyramid that I have here, at the bottom we've got all of those personal reporting, team reporting. At the top we've got I love what it says on the left: permanent record subject to compliance. So here in the U.S. at least, we have regulation that's called Sarbanes-Oxley, which, since I'm not a lawyer, I won't try to explain the details. But the bottom line is, if you publish financial data as a publicly traded company and that financial data is wrong, your executives can go to prison. And if there's one thing that I've found in my almost 30 years working in tech, it's that executives hate prison. So as you get up to these, like the enterprise data warehouse, the things that get reported out to the SEC, like this is where those tighter controls come in. But the most important thing is that wherever it makes sense in your organization, that you have consistent criteria to say, these are the systems that need more oversight, these are the systems that need less oversight, and this is who's responsible for doing what. And the best thing is, there's no wrong answer. You can draw that line wherever it makes sense. You know, the line between more managed or less managed, between category 1 and category 4. What's important is that you draw the line and that there is broad agreement amongst the people that need to agree, which is also kind of hand wavy, but get that buy-in from the people who need their voices heard, so that those things that are ad hoc and lightweight and self-service, that they can be as agile and responsive as they need to. And for those things that need real oversight and double checking and master data and all the governance and no executives serving prison time ever, that they have the resources that they need to support those more critical business goals. Inside of Microsoft, if we look back 10 years or so, we really had something of a cowboy culture. So back in the Steve Ballmer days, we had a culture where, for the most part, everybody had a SQL Server box under their desk. Everybody had their own database, which meant that everybody had their own data, which meant that everybody had their own version of the truth. And what this meant was that in every meeting, it would start off with like here's our predictions for the next quarter, or like here's our view of sales for this month. So someone would share information to drive a discussion, and the discussion would invariably involve, where does that come from? My numbers don't look like that. Are you sure that that's right? And halfway through the hour, the parties involved, they've given up, they agree to disagree. The person who owns the numbers is going to go do some legwork and follow up via email. And the rest of the meeting can't actually make the decisions that it was supposed to, because there's no alignment on the numbers. Like, I know that this wasn't only a Microsoft thing, but I sat through dozens and dozens of these emails, and I have to say it doesn't happen anymore. I literally cannot remember the last time that happened. And that's because in Microsoft, or at least in Microsoft Finance, which is the specific, like, it's both the specific domain that this slide was built to represent, and it's that data domain that everybody cares about the most. If your numbers have dollar signs in front of them, these are the important numbers that leaders make decisions on and care about the most. So inside of Microsoft, the finance org, which is where like some of the most compelling BI work was being done, they came up with this idea that they called discipline at the core and flexibility at the edge. And even though this is like a really high level slide, it is generalizable wisdom that everyone should feel encouraged to follow, where the data that organizationally you say everybody needs to agree on this and everybody needs to use the same numbers. And again, typically it's in the finance domain, but there may be others in your organization where it makes sense. Like there is a team in IT with business stakeholders on the outside that builds, maintains, and curates that data. So in Microsoft, there are ones of hierarchies. So it may be hundreds of tables and like it's a giant, giant data because it's what all of our business runs on. But our MS sales system, we basically have a single source of truth that everyone inside of Microsoft has the ability to request access to. It's all security trimmed because it's like it needs to be compliant to make sure that like no executives go to jail and that there's no insider trading opportunity or similar things. But if you need access to the data, you can get it. And perhaps more importantly, everyone knows that if you are including on any reports that get shared to make business decisions, data values that are mastered in the MS sales system, then your data shall come from MS sales. Like we've got this single source of truth, like that's what you're going to use, right? But at the same time, there's this broad awareness that there's a universe of data that everybody needs the ability to use the data that makes sense for them. And this is where the flexibility at the edge comes in. So between that one, like there is one single version of this slice of the truth, and like everybody do whatever they want to, there's all sorts of systems that are in between, like walking your way up that pyramid from the previous slide. But the beautiful thing is that with Power BI, composite models, and a variety of other approaches, anybody can start with the MS sales data and build on top of it to drive whatever outcomes they need to. So it's really like truly proven success. And in addition to this view, and I'll mention as well, this started off as an NDA slide that I stole from somebody else's deck. You can see that I stripped the numbers out because I never got approval to share exactly how much time and money we wasted, but it was significant. But in addition to this slide from Microsoft Finance, I've had multiple customers describe verbally to me an approach that looks a lot like this. So again, we have discipline at the core, but I've had literally dozens of leaders from various organizations describe to me the whole idea of, yeah, well, anybody can do whatever they want to with data. Like everybody's got Power BI desktop. Like we don't let them share. Like we're not going to buy all those licenses. I hear that too. But everybody has access to the data that they need, and then there's a process for them to request a pro license and the other stuff as they need. And the way that Power BI licensing is set up, it generally means everybody gets desktop because desktop is free. People and teams that need it get pro so they can share, publish and share with each other. People responsible for departmental BI, where you're starting to get into hundreds of people in the consumer audience for a given report or set of reports. They might have access to premium capacity with rules to get a given app or workspace onto premium capacity. And typically these days, that enterprise BI, like the hardcore BI, is being done by it's being done by a central BI team, typically in IT, but they're still using Power BI as that platform. And moving from this generalization, the diagram is the same, but the labels are different. My favorite example of this is from a major retail organization. It's not the one that you're thinking of. It's not the one that starts with a W, but it's basically a North American retailer where they ensured that anybody in their organization can work with whatever data they need. Like if you're a stock boy or a store manager, like you'll get like you'll get access to data and can work with it to support your job. A lot don't, but everybody has access. There are some departments, and I'm going to highlight this, like think the floral department. Think about the physical merchandise life cycle of a cut flower. This is very different than like hardware or housewares. If a paper towel, roll of paper towel sits on the shelf for 6 months, it's still merchandise, right? If a flower sits on the shelf for 6 months, it's compost. So there's departments based on their business needs where they have more data and more resources made available, because this is key. If you're the floral manager responsible for the inventory for a store, like you might be responsible for millions of dollars each year worth of inventory. We want to make sure that you've got all the insights that you need to make those decisions. In a lot of departments, they have what they call power users. These are often the people that, even though data is not their job, they kind of naturally go above and beyond. They're more interested in it. They're more technical. They've built the skills. This organization leans in to empower them with more skills, more tools, better resources, and typically a better connection with that team that runs data and BI all up. And this pattern is just proven again and again and again. And the other pattern is, how do we get the self-service solutions that are built by the business users in the outer rings? How do we operationalize these? How do we hand these off and promote these so that they are instead managed by a BI team whose job it is to maintain BI systems, right? This is another generalizable pattern, and I'm using the same North American retailer as my specific example. But if we zoom in on that hardcore IT ring, like where do the BI apps that fall into that enterprise BI context, where do they come from? Very often they come from business users, because in this organization, they have established twice weekly office hours. They used to do it once a month. Now, because of the demand, like they invested in the culture and it is reaping benefits, they have twice weekly office hours where a business user can come in and say, I think my application is ready for me to hand off to IT, like it's grown too big for me. And this organization, again, specific example, but generalizable pattern, this organization has a 4-step process or 4-phase process with well-defined requirements for how you get from one to the other. So if you want to enter the exploration phase, you come into office hours with your Power BI desktop file or your Excel file and a business case. You're then assigned a buddy from IT, and that buddy is going to work with you to prove out to say, like, is there actually a problem here that could justify the self-service solution becoming part of the stable of apps that the BI team supports? Maybe a new app, maybe being rolled up into an existing one. But if they decide that, yes, it does, it has potential, they move on to the promotion phase. During the promotion phase, they create data sources and connections on an enterprise gateway, because in this organization, nobody has permissions to do that, right? It's a privileged operation, so needs to go through the processes. They set up a scheduled refresh, and they apply organizational theming, like colors and fonts and logos and so on, to the report. And at this point, they check again. Like, it may be that having a gateway and scheduled refresh set up, this is all that they need. A lot of apps stop there. But if the business impact or business risk is such that justifies IT taking ownership, they move on to stages 3 and 4. For the preparation phase, they will move the data sources and any processes around them into something that's sustainable. A lot of self-service BI, like they're getting their data from Excel or SharePoint lists or what have you, they will move instead into Azure SQL or other more enterprise-ready sources that can be managed. They'll write documentation, they'll assign ownership. So there's a business owner, there's a technical owner, there's a data steward, there's a support owner. And spoiler alert, if you can't identify those people for a given app, then it doesn't qualify to move on, right? It's not ready to grow up if you can't say who will own it, and those people or their managers say, yes, this fits into my priorities or my team's priorities. And then the final step, moving on to full operationalization, is that it gets deployed into a prod workspace on premium, and it is then supported by the support team and the data team with an SLA that's enforced like any other enterprise application. And let's rewind a little. So we've got discipline at the core and flexibility at the edge. We've got a small number of things that are very highly managed that we care about a lot because of the impact or the risk. We have a very large number of things that we don't care about nearly as much. And now we've got a well-defined process for going from the outside to the inside and seeing what meets the criteria to move on. So that's the easy part. I'm going to pause, see if there are any questions, and then I will dive into the hard part. Either you guys are really, really smart or you're really, really asleep, or some combination of those two. So I see you're still off mute, Kevin. Fire away.
Nope, no questions.
Awesome. So the easy part is technology. The hard part, like Soylent Green, is people. And when we're thinking about people, the thing that you need to do is you need to have both a center of excellence and a community of practice. So these are, for the most part, non-negotiable aspects to a successful data culture. Where you invest first and how you invest and what they look like, there's a lot of flexibility there because like there's no one size fits all. It has to fit the way that your organization works, and the data culture needs to reflect the business culture. But a center of excellence is a dedicated set of people, typically from both BI and both IT and business teams. The people who own systems and processes, the decision makers that get to tell people what to do, and perhaps most importantly, people with budgets to fund things. We'll talk about a little bit about what they do in a slide or two, but basically this center of excellence is responsible for driving the adoption and appropriate usage of data and BI and tools inside some non-trivial slice of the organization. If you're in really small, like let's say you've got 50 people in your company, that center of excellence, it's probably a Teams channel with 2 or 3 people that spend 20% of their job answering questions and sharing links and saying, sure, I'll hop on a call or I'll come by your desk. Like it doesn't need to be a big thing. But in a larger organization, let's say that you have a couple 100,000 employees globally distributed, you may end up with a network of excellence, like a set of federated or autonomous centers of excellence that each work to support their own slice of the business and are aligned in a way that aligns with the business culture. So they're responsible for enabling the people that need to work with data to do so in a more efficient way. It's an additive task. And the people that are working with data, like this is the community of practice. And my guess is, since you are familiar with a user group, like you are literally attending a user group session right now, you know a couple things. You know that people like Kevin, they volunteer, like this is not Kevin's day job. Like he does all of the work to find speakers, to schedule things, to introduce, to do the recordings, like all the things that he does. He's doing this to support this community so that people can come together for their mutual benefit. And like today, he asked me to speak. I get to talk to all y'all. And he invited all y'all to come in to learn, to engage, to do the things that align with your value. The same pattern plays out in a community of practice inside a data culture where you need people who have problems. Like I'm trying to do a year-over-year thingy in DAX. People with solutions. It's like, this is how I've done a year-over-year thingy in DAX on my data set. Or maybe here's a link to this Italian website where they've solved this problem already. Go watch this video where they talk about this. A community of practice typically involves champions, where in a business, the champion is that person who volunteers to help. Like odds are you are that person, because the people that fit this criteria tend to be the people that engage with the broader technical community. But if you are the finance person that all the other people on your finance team, they come to you when they've got a reporting question, spoiler alert, you're a champion. You help them because it's the right thing to do. It lifts all the boats, even though it's probably not your job. In a healthy data culture, the people running the center of excellence are going to notice the work that you're doing in the community, and they're going to say thank you. They're going to I'll talk about motivation in a couple of slides. But the other thing that a community needs is like a moderator or a steward or a curator, like someone to make sure that when there are questions, that they get answers. When there's activity, that there's a response. Like it's a thing that you need to keep feeding for it to grow. Like I've been baking for many years, so I did not go into sourdough mode when the pandemic started. But if you started a sourdough starter, like at the beginning, it's like, oh, I'm going to feed it every day. I'm going to make bread twice a week and do all this other stuff. And odds are your sourdough starter died in the fridge when you got bored with sourdough bread, right? Your community will die in the fridge when you get bored with it. So it does take that ongoing care and feeding. And at this point, you're probably saying, it's like, oh my God, how am I going to do this? Like, I can't fund a center of excellence. I don't have any budget. This is where the executive sponsor is going to come in. Like, if this feels like it's above your pay grade, understand that there's lots and lots of positive work that you can do from the bottom up. If you are the person going that extra mile to help others, to drive these positive outcomes, to help make other people better in how they work with data, like please keep doing that thing. It is really, really valuable. But for you to take it to the next level, this is not a fight that you can fight alone. You need that sponsorship, you need that support to take it and maintain it and turn it into something that is truly impactful and sustainable. So if we move on, there's two more points that I want to add. So the first one is you need a portal. So you may recognize the screenshot that I stole from the Valve Portal game intro video. So like back in the early 2000s, there was a video game called Portal, where you basically make little teleporting portals. You put one over there and one over there, and you walk in one and walk out the other. And the puzzle on the slide, like this guy needs to figure out how to get to the other side of that chasm. He'll do it with a portal. Like that person is your user, right? Your user is like, oh, like, I want to do this reporting thing, but I don't know how to get started. Like I've heard that BI has power, I guess. Like lots of users will want to achieve their goals and they won't know where to get started. A key success factor is having one portal, like one place that all of the resources are. This is where you have links to reports, links to data, link to training, guidance, help, a forum for chat and Q&A. Like always have one place where you send all the things. It doesn't need to physically live there, but you need to be able to say, it's like, wow, that's a great question. Thanks for reaching out. I need to ask you to take it here, or the answer is already here, or go here. Like you need to consistently direct traffic to that portal. I'm going to tell a brief aside. This is not truly data culture, but it's my lived reality, and it's something that definitely applies to this pattern. So my team at Microsoft, so the Power BI CAT team, before we expanded to include all of Fabric, for the most part, we've been somewhere in the 10 to 20 people range. And Power BI has like billions of customers, I think. Like everybody in the world uses Power BI. And inside of Microsoft, there are thousands of technical sellers, like the pre-sales and the post-sales and the support, and like all of these people that work with customers on a day-to-day basis that may not know Power BI deeply enough to answer every question. And my team has established an internal Teams-based community where if a member of this internal FTE group goes there and asks a question, they get answers from the ultimate Power BI authorities in the world. And I probably know less about Power BI than anybody else on the CAT team, but they can go there and ask a question, and the people that know more about it than anybody else will answer. But the problem with this is not everybody knows that this community exists, and not everybody likes following rules. So if you remember a couple years ago, or you may have noticed this, like I was very, very prominent in blogging about data flows when they were first introduced to Power BI. Like I probably had more data flows posts than any other blogger out there. And this meant that at least like 1,000 times a week, I'd get some random person sending me an email or pinging me on Teams. It's like, hey, Matthew, my customer has this data flows question. And do you know what I would say 9 times out of 10? It's like, I will not answer that question. And I shouldn't say 9 times out of 10 because that's an exaggeration. 10 times out of 10, I would say no. Can I answer this question? I will not answer your question via email. I cannot scale to answer questions directly, but if you go to this URL, like aka.ms blah, 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 like if you go here and ask that question, you will have access to a group of deep technical experts on Power BI that are managing this community of you and your peers. And if you need a personal response from me, feel free to tag me in your question and I will do my best to respond, but I cannot and will not respond to one-off questions via email. And even though like I feel kind of like bad doing this, I feel like a jerk saying this out loud sometimes, but for a lot of people, they will always follow the path of least resistance. They don't care about what's right. They don't care about scaling. They don't care about supporting communities. They just want a quick win with the least effort on their part. So they will always follow the path of least resistance. And I refuse to be the path of least resistance. I will be the path of greatest resistance. But I've created and have helped grow this one location where all of the resources that they need are there on demand. It's kind of like the tough love that when you were a teenager, you didn't always get what you wanted, but you probably got what you needed. That's what this portal is about. But for you to make your portal successful, you need to understand that when people come to you directly, because that's what they've always done, you need to, as gently as necessary, gently as appropriate, redirect them to that portal that you've created for this purpose. And the other thing that you need to understand is all of these people are people. And people involve psychology and feelings and motivations and all these things. And there are 3 primary motivators for human adults. So skill variety, like I get to do different things on different days. Like I'm not on an assembly line doing the same thing over and over again all day. There's task significance. I get to see where my work fits into the bigger machine. And task identity. So I know that my work, my efforts are making the world a better place. Like that's why some people might work for $50,000 for Greenpeace when they could be making $500,000 somewhere else doing the same work. It's because they have different motivations than someone who is motivated primarily by money. And the 2 other like amplifiers for this are autonomy. I have more control over what I do, how I do it, when or where I do it. Like working from home is a big one for me. And then the other one is feedback, getting both positive feedback. That's a great job. Or negative feedback. Here's a way that you might improve. Both of these are proven to be highly motivating because they both show that someone cares enough to consider what you're doing and provide feedback on it. And one of the things that we did to drive that internal community from a couple hundred people to we are now above 5,000 monthly active users on this community, which is really, really big, is we've reached out to the members of the community that are contributing the most, who are actively answering questions and lifting all boats again. I keep reusing that phrase. Like we'll reach out to them via email to say thank you, show how much we appreciate it, talk about the impacts that they're driving, and we copy their boss and sometimes their skip level to make sure that their management chain knows that they're aligning with Microsoft's cultural values and helping increase the impact of others through their personal work. So, spoiler alert, we're going to run over. I hope that no one has a hard stop right at 7 Eastern. We won't be too much over, but I do want to make sure that everybody knows we'll be a few minutes over an hour. Kevin, any questions? Are we still very, very quiet?
We do have some questions that have come in.
Yes.
So, question number one: what are characteristics of a good executive sponsor? In some cases, the sponsor can already see the value of getting the data, but they may not be
Yep.
interested in developing a data culture. How do you pitch that?
So don't pitch it about the data culture. Pitch it about the outcomes and the characteristics. So I'm gonna talk about behaviors that I see in successful or the canonically awesome executive sponsors. It's that they are constantly promoting and communicating about your work. So I'm going to pivot away from data a little bit because I want to tell a personal example because I can really get some nuance in there. I mentioned that my team and I run a customer advisory program where we work with like the senior strategic decision makers from these giant organizations around the world. My executive sponsor is Arun Ulag. He is the corporate vice president for Azure Data. So he's responsible for like anything that has data in it. He owns it from a product perspective. And when he talks about enterprise voice, which is the program that my team and I have grown over the past 5 years, it looks like this. So once or twice a week, I get copied on an email from my CVP to either one of his peers or to one of his leadership team, like typically a VP or GM or similar junior executive, where Arun is saying, it's like, hey, I just listened to this great interview, like there's great insights from Enterprise Voice. In it, this customer described this problem or this challenge or this scenario. Here's a link to the notes. Here's a link to the recording. Go read it or listen to it. And before our next LT meeting, come up with a plan for how we're going to address this. So, like, he's not trying to randomize them. He's not saying we need to solve this problem first. But what it demonstrates here is that on an ongoing basis, like multiple times per week, he is choosing to prioritize spending his incredibly valuable time consuming the outputs that my team and my program produce, and then he is asking others to engage similarly and to act on it. He highlights it at all hands meetings or town hall meetings. He talks about it constantly with other executives outside of Microsoft. So like once or twice a month, I get somebody saying, it's like, hey, like my VP talked to your VP, and now my VP wants me to understand what you're doing so that we can do something similar as well. If we track this back to the like, what does a great executive sponsor do? He motivates from the top to ensure that the people that he needs to act and that you want to act, that they understand the value that he's getting from your efforts and that he expects them to do similar things to get similar value, not necessarily because it's the data or a data culture that he cares about, but because your actions are driving the outcomes that are a priority to him. So this is typically the behaviors that I see. So Kevin, how many questions do we have? Because I have another parallel story that I'm dying to tell, but I also don't want to run too much over.
There's one other question right now in chat.
Okay, so I'm gonna share this other story, and this story is from someone who was at the time a finance manager for a UK-based energy company, and he basically part of his job was taking screenshots of reports, putting them into PowerPoint slides, printing up the PowerPoint slides and putting them on conference room tables so that the chief financial officer and his LT could make decisions in meetings. And keep in mind, this was not that long ago. Like there's still people doing this sort of work as we speak. And like he hated it. He loved his job. He loved working with data. He loved driving these incomes and outcomes and insights, but he hated the whole printy, screenshotty work. But he didn't have any real insight into into how he could like move the lever. He did not have the leverage that he needed to drive change, but he was an effing ninja. So this is back before the pandemic, and the finance team was all in the same building. So what he did was he invested in taking one of his existing Power BI reports, the reports that he would take screenshots of and print out to put on the conference room table. He built an iPad optimized version of this report and started timing his morning so that he was riding up the elevator with the CFO. So they'd get into the elevator and he'd have the iPad, and it's like, hey, have you noticed that? And he'd interact. He'd show that the data was fresher than the executive was ever used to seeing. Like he's basically dangling this shiny object in front of the cat. And after an elevator ride or three, the CFO is like, that's amazing. Where is this report? Why don't I have this report? And that was the hook that he needed to start aligning more with what the executive needed. And not only did they completely change the way that this organization works with data, this individual is now part of that CFO's leadership team responsible for multiple billions of dollars worth of business and the decision making for it. So it was both an organizational and a career transformation. Next question, Kevin.
Yeah, so next question here. From your experience, which industries do you see having the most success in building such a data culture? What would you say the success rate looks like in healthcare specifically?
Oh, okay. So my initial response was I haven't really seen any trends. Like I've never noticed industry being a strong predictor. But the thing that I see in healthcare, like I'm going to use this as the example, is that healthcare is probably like the most constrained industry or among the most constrained industries that are out there. So like part of it is very, very cost conscious. And even though there are significant financial returns from having better data-driven decisions, they're not always short-term wins. They're often longer term. And at least from my perception, both the constrained budget, the very traditional roles, like the people that need data are often not in a situation where data is available or can be available for them. It's highly regulated, so there's like a lot of data that you just can't do some things with in a legal way. Like there's just a lot of stuff going on. I will say that there are some North American, like the very large healthcare firms that you're probably thinking of that run the hospital chains or the insurance organizations and so on that have been very successful. It does tend to be a much slower journey. And for these organizations, I have never seen a healthcare company successfully go through this digital transformation to build a data culture without a strong, proactive, top-down executive sponsor. Like the energy industry example that I used was sort of a bottom-up example where the worker bee, as it were, managed up to convince someone to become an executive sponsor. In healthcare and in other traditional, highly regulated industries, it's typically going from the other direction, but I do not have any numbers to back up these anecdotes.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Are we good to proceed, sir?
Yes. No
cool.
more
Thank you.
questions.
And thank you both for the questions. I absolutely appreciate it. I'm going to move in to wrap things up, and I want to wrap things up with some quotes that I'm going to tie back into the broader themes. This is the other slide that I'm going to read verbatim. I first encountered this in the Introduction to an Object-Oriented something in design, like an OO analysis and design course that I took 30 plus years ago in college, and it's stuck with me ever since. So John Gall, who is a complexity expert, he states, or he asserts, that a complex system that works is invariably found to have evolved from a simple system that works. The inverse proposition also appears to be true. A complex system designed from scratch never works and cannot be made to work. And the reason that I include this in the summary is because the overwhelming majority of successful data cultures that I have seen, they start small and grow. When you've got an executive is like, well, we're going to roll this out across the whole organization, like you can't do that. Like you can't get there from here. You need to start small, see what works, make it bigger, see what works, make it bigger. And each time reevaluating and iterating as the context changes, the problems will change. And that means the solution will need to be adapted as the context grows. The other quote that I want to throw out there is one of my favorite Sun Tzu quotes. So Sun Tzu, this legendary, perhaps mythical Chinese general who wrote The Art of War. And in The Art of War, he says, strategy without tactics is the slowest route to victory. Tactics without strategy is the noise before defeat. So don't start moving until you know where you're going. I don't want to say don't act, because very often there's like a lot of low-hanging fruit, like obvious things that you can do, obvious problems that you can fix. I don't want to stop you from doing that. But if you do not understand your business's organizational goals, if you don't know the business strategy, you cannot align your BI strategy or your data culture to it. Like you can't hit a target that you can't see. Like it's we all have a desire to act, and many technologists don't feel like they are adding value unless they are actively delivering a solution. But working on a solution, when you don't understand the problem, that is not progress, it's noise. The third quote is from Leo Tolstoy. And I swear this is going to make sense for data culture. This one feels like the biggest stretch to me, but it's also the one that like resonates with me the most deeply personally. So the opening line of Anna Karenina, this classic novel, is all happy families are alike. Each unhappy family is unhappy in its own way. And if you think back to the characteristics and the patterns, the rules that I've shared over the past hour, every single successful organization that I've worked with has done these things. Like this is what a happy family looks like. These are the things that lead to success. But when I talk with organizations that are struggling, like they're throwing good money after bad, they're not getting the results on, like they're unhappy, and they're worried about whether or not their team or their job will be there in a week or a month. All of the unhappy organizations are messed up and failing in their own unique ways as a product of their unique organizational culture. But the things that I've shared here and the things that I'll share in the links, like I'll give the deck to Kevin so you can click on the links as well. But these are all common characteristics that organizations with healthy, successful data cultures have all implemented. And it's from this engagement with multiple organizations that I've distilled this deck and these hard things and easy things. But I also want to emphasize that even if you can see the destination, the journey to get there is going to be different from organization to organization and from time to time, like from month to month or year to year. Like imagine that you're on one bank of this river and a healthy data culture is on the other side. Like I could swim, I could take a canoe, like there's lots of ways that I could get across, but maybe your river looks like this. Or maybe like a month later, the river that used to look like the river on the left now looks like the river on the right. There is no one size fits all. Every starting point is unique. Every destination is unique. The resources, the constraints, like all of these things that will define what your data culture journey looks like, they are unique to you, to your organization, and to this unique point in time. And this is where, like, I'm really happy that the camera works. So I assume no one was looking at what I posted on LinkedIn and Mastodon an hour or two ago. But I basically asked, what does this 1651 manuscript on Iberian greatsword have to do with building a data culture? And I need to find my thing. I'm going to stop sharing for a second because back in 1651, Diogo Gomes de Figueiredo wrote a treatise on the use of the montante. And Kevin, can you see my bigger picture now?
Yeah.
Bigger.
Yep.
Awesome. So they say that self-service BI is a two-edged sword. This is that sword. So this is a montante. It's a little bit less than 6 feet. It's a two-handed greatsword in the Iberian tradition. And in 1651, Figueiredo published this treatise that includes 16 rules of the montante. This is how he describes them, as rules, where each rule is a sequence of movements that are designed to be used in a specific way, in a specific combination. And like the reason that I do this is I love swords and I love swinging them around. So I'm kind of playing because it's the thing that gives me joy. But you can't fight with a great sword by reading a book, right? You can't have a single written rule for every situation. Like that doesn't exist, because when you're in the moment, when you're surrounded by brigands with rapiers, like there's no one rule to follow. There's no one thing to do. But the way that Figueiredo presents these rules is by saying, these are the building blocks. These are the pieces that once you know them, like once you deeply know them, that you will be able to apply them in all of these different situations. So whether you're guarding a bridge, bodyguarding someone, you need to kill every single person in the town square, like these are the rules that you will use, and you will apply the right parts of the right rules in the right context because you know them. And in my mind, the rules that I've shared tonight, like the general guidance that we've talked about, it's the same sort of building block. The sword analogy is absolutely a stretch. I'm with you, but I think that it will hold up to closer inspection. So fire away, Kevin.
There we go.
Okay, so Kevin's back on mute.
No,
I'm going to wrap things up.
So there is a question in chat. Sorry about that.
That's awesome.
So I'm a young data analyst. Right now, I'm in a position where the chain of command is bottlenecked with one executive who acts as an arbitrator. The company I just started at has no formal data or IT department. Data decisions, as it relates to data architecture, are being sidestepped. The current thinking is to build web-based dashboards straight from siloed sources rather than a centralized data warehouse. I'm not quite sure how to get buy-in to set the proper data foundation. Any thoughts on that?
So first of all, the thing that you just described is an absolute nightmare. And the fact that you're asking this question says that like you have the opportunity to be part of the solution where everybody else seems to be investing in the problem. So I'm going to step back a little, and I'm going to reiterate something that I said earlier when talking about executive sponsorship. And that is, executives don't care about the technology, they care about the business outcomes. And when I think about the like web apps on top of different siloed nonsense, like this is where we were 30 years ago, right? Like the reason that we have data warehouses is because of these very well-known challenges that come from having all of these different silos and only having the ability to get insights within the constraints of a given source system or a given silo. So the thing that I would ask you to look at to start, like keeping in mind, I've got the 5-second summary of what is a very complex problem. So don't take anything that I'm saying as gospel, but understand that this is probably the right direction in which to begin moving. And that is, spend time thinking about what are the business goals and the business outcomes that you and your team are being asked to achieve with frickin' web apps on top of silos of data. Like what are you being asked to do? And when you identify gaps between the place where you've been told to go and the road that you've been told to drive, this is the wedge that you can use to start having a conversation about best practices and taking basic steps to invest in a data architecture that will actually achieve those downstream goals. Going from one set of reports on top of one app and another set of reports on top of another app to something that is more sustainable, modern, and best practice, like this is a big step. So like set your expectations as low as you can. But the first step is don't lead with a solution, understand the problem, and then highlight how how a better approach will get you closer to solutions to the problems. Because if you only go in with the solution, like this is the thing that I see day in and day out in the teams that I work with at Microsoft. Like if you go in and you push the solution, everybody's going to pick, like they'll find the little things to pick at until it dies. But if you get everybody to agree on the problem, it's like, what are the things that are most important to solve? And then you can come up with an honest solution that delivers the most important things that everybody agreed on. Like this makes it really hard, much harder for people to say, that's not a good solution. My dumb idea is better, because they already agreed on this being the most important part of the problem to solve. And if you cannot, let me imagine that you've got 3 levels of management. So you've got your executive, your director, and then your immediate manager. If you can't get alignment on the problems at one level, reduce your scope, lower your sights, lower your expectations, aim slightly lower, and see if you can get alignment at the next level down and then the next level down. And Kevin, is it appropriate for me to swear mildly on this stream, or is this purely family friendly? It's the A word.
Oh.
Okay, I won't. So I once had someone, a mentor that I trust and respect greatly. He told me that he had what he called the 2A rule, and A is a placeholder for a longer word that I won't use. But he basically said, if your manager and their manager are both the same kind of A, then you need to find a new job. You will never be successful on the team that you're on. If there are different types of A's, then you'll find a way to work. But that's the red flag. And it's not directly related to data, but it feels like relevant wisdom at this point. So I wanted to share it. So I am going to wrap things up. I want to share some resources. So you just sat through a 75-minute summary of what Melissa Coates, MVP extraordinaire, and I have published in the Power BI guidance documentation as the Power BI adoption roadmap. So we have 10 or 12 articles, maybe 150 or 175 pages of content that basically talks about a lot of these things. It's a little bit more tool-centric, it's a little bit more prescriptive, but if you're wondering, it's like how do I take all of this random ranting and slides and turn it into action? That is a great next step. And while the adoption roadmap is complete, we're continuing to tweak it, but it's done. We're also working on the implementation planning guidance, where the adoption roadmap is high level and strategic. Implementation planning is more implementation strategic. Like, how do I apply specific features in specific ways to solve specific high-level common patterns and problems? Melissa, MVP, Kurt Baer, and I are continuing to invest in the implementation planning. And this is part of the broader guidance documentation that the CAT team publishes. It's all the best practices that, if you knew this and did this, you wouldn't need us showing up to dig you out of the hole that you dug yourself into. That's my summary of the guidance docs. And in addition to this Microsoft official guidance, on my personal blog and YouTube channel, back in calendar year 2020, I published a 17 video plus blog series on building a data culture. This informed the guidance documentation and informs this talk as well. But if you want the longer version with a younger, fitter version of Matthew elaborating a lot of the same topics, that is a place to go. And in addition to this, my team is involved in a pretty significant number, like 50 or so customer success stories. These are published at customers.microsoft.com. And even though some of the stories that are there are very marketing centric, like they're a little bit hypey for my taste, the success stories that my team invests in, they tend to take the format of this. The customer organization had this problem, like this is what they were doing today, and this is where they were struggling. This is how they approached the solution. Like they took these actions. This is how they used Power BI and other Microsoft products in these ways. This is what the outcome looked like and the successes that they drove. And often these are the next steps that they have planned. And the reason I love these so much is a lot of these are the same customers whose NDA engagements have driven a lot of the insights that I've shared here and in other documentation. But through these customer success stories, they've agreed to publish like a slice of their truth. You know, typically it's the happy stories, it's not all the pain, but these are real customers who had real problems and applied these modern Microsoft data technologies to deliver real solutions for them. And then they agreed to have them published in collaboration with Microsoft. So if you are, like circling back to some of those earlier questions, if you are looking to motivate executives, showing how some existing big company has done something similar, this is one of the reasons that these stories exist. It's often a way to reach that key audience. The final thing that I want to share, like this is the last slide, that adoption roadmap goes through all of the topics that we've talked about today with the contents bullet there. I'm not going to read them all, but these are the articles that make up the adoption roadmap. And the thing that I love about this series is that in each article, we have like a key set of concepts and context. Like this is what's important to think about here. We have considerations and key actions. Like these are the things that you should think about and think about doing to improve in this area. And we have a clearly and consistently defined set of maturity levels for each of these areas so that you can qualitatively measure your organization against a relatively clear benchmark to basically say we are more mature here, we are less mature here. And very often, this can then serve as an input into prioritization, downstream work, and then the iteration that follows. So the adoption roadmap, I think, is the best content that we've published in a while. I hope that if you do one thing after this is done, it is to go look for the adoption roadmap, read through it, and see ways that you can learn from those who have gone before you to increase your organizational maturity and get further down your path to building a data culture that fits in your organization. So this is all that I have. I want to say thank you to everyone. We ran over more than I had expected, but this is all that I have to share. We do have more time for Q&A. If there are more Qs, I would be happy to aid them. If there are more questions, I would be happy to answer them.
All right, thank you kindly, Matthew. No questions in chat right now, but if there are any last second questions, get them in there and we'll ask away. In the meantime, I do want to say thank you again. Great presentation. And quick reminder to everyone that our next meetings, this is the last meeting for us in July, obviously. We will have our Advanced DBA second Tuesday, main meeting third Tuesday, and BI and Data Science fourth Tuesday. All those will go up on Meetup, meetup.com/TriPass. You'll see those in the next several days, but we'll have that up. And looks like my vamping did not lead to any new questions, so I think you answered them all. So again, thank you kindly.
Awesome.
We appreciate you coming in and did a great job.
Well, thanks very much, Kevin, and thanks everybody for sticking around. Take care. Talk to you soon. Bye
All
bye.
right. Thank you. And everyone, until we see each other again, take care.